It's slow. It could be my computer, but no, now it's redirecting to YouTube. And we're there. Okay. We've muted, so I don't hear. So we're on YouTube. We're on Zoom. We don't have, hundreds of people tonight, so that's good. So, but YouTube acts as the recording agent, right? Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order. This is a public meeting of the San Mateo Union High School District Board of Trustees. If you wish to make a comment about an agenda item, please send an email to comments@smuhsd.org with your name, email address, and your Zoom name if different, and the item under which you would like to comment. The board president, that's me, will call on you. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. There's only 2 items to comment on, C1 and C2. The board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public comment depending upon the topic and number of persons wishing to be heard. Will our translator, Carlos, please repeat that in some way? And then I'll start the translation when you're done, and you can say that too. Okay?
Muy buenas noches. Este es la mesa directiva escolar de San Mateo. El señor presidente, el señor Freeman, dijo que por favor, si tienen algún comentario, que pueden mandarle a él el comentario usando las siglas de San Mateo Unified High School District, que significan SMUHSD, o sea, la San Mateo Unified High School District. Si quieren mandarle un comentario a él, solo tienen 3 minutos si van a decirle el comentario. Si lo escriben en español está bien, podemos traducirlo también. Y después de que yo termine de hablar, me van a poner en la casilla donde ustedes pueden escoger español, pueden entrar al español. Abajo de la pantalla verán lo que dice inglés o español, English o Spanish, y pueden escoger ustedes español. Gracias. Okay, sir.
Okay, you should be good now. English and Spanish interpretation available. Does it work?
Not yet. I don't see it yet. You have
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Bottom right.
Now
Right
try it.
there.
Did I do? Yeah, it says.
I see it. It's there.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
Okay,
I got it.
good. Okay, so I'm going to do roll call. Mr. Land.
En este momento van a hacer llamando.
Carlos,
¿Sí?
you have to go to, you have to click on the interpretation button and then go to Spanish, and then you're over there.
On the bottom, you see interpretation.
I got it, yeah. I click, you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we don't want you. We want them to hear. If you go to,
I got
It's
it.
simultaneous translation.
Yeah, I see Spanish here and I click on it.
Doesn't do it.
No, it doesn't do it, yeah.
Oh, I did it wrong. Okay. Let me try it again. It's me. What's your email? Celesco.
Sinolasco, yeah.
It's right
got it.
there.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
I knew it wasn't your fault, Carlos.
Okay, we can't hear him now. So we're going to start again with the roll call. My mistake, all this technology. Good luck to whoever has to do this next year. Mr. Land.
Present.
Miss Lees Dwyer. Trustee
Present.
Trustee Hanley.
Yes.
Vice President Griffin, are you getting lessons?
Here.
For next year. You're here, and I'm here. Mark Friedman, the board president. So we go to item C1. Is everyone who's wants to comment on C1, who's going to present on C1 in the presentation?
We have a couple student speakers that are a little later in the presentation that I'll promote once we get a little closer to that part of it.
Well, I'll promote them if you tell me their name, because I don't think you can do it.
I can. I think I have permissions tonight, so
Okay, good.
I'll help you.
It's okay. We have a couple of public speakers after the presentation.
So Julia, Dr. Kimby, why don't you just go ahead?
Okay, great. So we have here tonight our facilitators from the National Equity Project, and they've actually been working with administrators in the district for about a year now, and they'll speak to some of that work tonight. So I'm very pleased to introduce Colm Davis and Wu Williams, who I'll pass this presentation over to begin our session to take a deep dive into equity in the district and have some learning together.
Thank you, Julia. Would you mind either stop sharing or going to the next slide if you want to drive it?
We'll go to the next slide, I think.
All right. That was just a good evening. So we're glad to be here. We wanted to just introduce ourselves. The National Equity Project, for those who don't know, has been around for about 25 years. And we are a leadership development and systems change organization that is committed to increasing capacity of people to achieve thriving, self-determining, educated, and just communities. And our work has been primarily in the education sphere, working with schools, districts, counties, et cetera. But we also do work beyond that, all in service of this mission. Next slide, please. This is who you're with tonight. Again, my name is Colm Davis, and I've been with the National Equity Project since 2004 as a professional learning facilitator, as well as an equity leadership coach. And here's my colleague.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Wu Williams Zoe, and I am an associate with the National Equity Project and have been with the organization for a little over a year now. And prior to that, was a school principal, middle and high school principal, and before that, a teacher, an English teacher. It's great to be here tonight.
So this is what we're up to today or tonight. This is a session where we're hoping to create some shared understanding about the commitment and the board's role in supporting the district's work toward equity in the current context. We're going to offer a systems model called the 6 or 7 circle model that can help people think through what systemic change could look like to address the cultural issues of hate and non-acceptance that have been identified by students, staff, and family community in the district. And to identify opportunities to strategically build conditions that would be necessary to support meaningful change given the board's sphere of influence. So we wanted to start by just grounding in the larger context that we're in, and we're going to talk about this again, the importance of thinking about not just what are we doing right now, but where are we in a larger picture. Next slide, please. And we wanted to just acknowledge, obviously, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and we appreciate this quote by Arundhati Roy, who shares that pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. And this one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. So as we are all sitting in a pandemic of COVID-19, we would say that there are dual pandemics, also the pandemic of systemic racism, and that we need to be able to find ways to move forward as systems, as a system, to create greater justice in acknowledging both the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and also the opportunities to consider how we do things differently, and the realities of long-standing systemic oppression that we want to find ways to work to dismantle and create more just communities. We also just want to acknowledge the context of the grand jury report, obviously, that has named specific incidents and issues that need to be addressed. And we want to have the session tonight be a way to think more broadly about what are the systemic change in addition to specific policies that might be necessary to create the communities in this district that you really are wanting to achieve. So just a final thought about the larger context, that we know many people in this moment are really striving for, wishing for a sense of normality, which we understand and all feel on some level. We wanted to offer the Sonia Renee Taylor quote about not going back to normal, that normal never was, that the pre-corona existence was never normal other than normalizing greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return to that. we are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. So we want to, again, just put all of tonight's content in the context of the realities that we're in and the potential opportunities for doing things differently, doing things anew, creating the kind of place we are committed to creating. And I'm going to pass it over to, I think, Julia and Wu, who are going to share a little bit about the work that has already been underway to be able to begin to create new possibilities.
So I think I'm going to just speak a bit just to give some context of the equity journey. And there has been much work done before some of the bullet points here, but we just wanted to put in context some of the work that we've done over the last couple of years. So last year, our administrators conducted book circles around equity. They read a variety of titles and we had some deep conversations about them. And last year we were working with, in the year before that, we're working with Epic Education. We learned the RIR protocol, which speaks to some of the things that we're talking about tonight. And that protocol is the recognize, interrupt, and repair. And it speaks to how do you interrupt when you see instances of hate speech happen on your campuses. And we actually did some practice around that. And then from there, we did some work last year. The board adopted the equity mission and vision statement in the spring of 2020, actually right before we went to closure. And that has been some good guidance for us as we moved forward. The National Equity Project actually started working with us right around that same time. And I think now I'm going to pass it over to some of our students, because the other work that we've been engaged in is working with a student equity leadership team. And these few representatives from that team actually just did an administrator leadership teach-in with our administrators on Tuesday. We spent 2 hours with a group of students and they taught us. And so they'll speak a little bit about how they got to the place and what they shared there. And Badri, Sophia, and Gamze, I don't know which one of you is speaking first, so I'll let you start us off. And then from there, we also have two of our facilitators, Don Bush and Stacia Veal. So you may remember Don Bush from being a teacher in our district for a long time. He has worked with us out of retirement with this group of students, and Stacia Veal, who's a therapist in the district at Mills right now, previously at Aragon, who've been working with this group of students. So we'll hear from the students first, and then Don and Stacia will speak to some of their role in this team. So I'm going to am I passing over to Sophia? Okay, Sophia, go for it.
Hi, my name is Sophia and I'm a junior at Hillsville High School, and I'm a co-lead for student equity along with Angela, Gamze, and Badri, but Angela couldn't be here tonight, but she's great. She is the founder of Student Equity, so a lot of credit due to her for doing that. It's really great work that she did. My pronouns are she, her, which are in my name, but basically Student Equity is a group of diverse students who represent SMUHSD and advocate for an anti-racist and fair district. So we target and work on issues at each school. We share experiences and voice perspectives of BIPOC students. We learn about systemic racism in schools locally and nationally. And we also create solutions for the district while working alongside staff. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gamze, and she'll talk about some of the initiatives that we worked on, including our teach-in and what we want to do in the future.
Hi, thank you. My name is Gamze. I'm a senior at Burlingame High School. And recently we actually had our teach-in. It was on Tuesday, November 17th. And we had some student speakers talk about their experience as a BIPOC student at their school. And we also talked about some issues that we see in the district and some solutions that we would want to see implemented in both our curriculum and just in school in general. For example, including a lot more diversity when it comes to the books and literature that we are reading in our classes, and having more books that were written by and talks about BIPOC authors and their experiences. And so, yeah, we've just been striving to create positive change in our district, and that's what the teach-in was about, to have students and have their voices be heard. Thank you.
to add on, we understand racism is a major issue. We understand that it manifests in many different ways, in many different forms, through literature, whether it be through how schools handle racist incidents, how schools handle homophobic incidents that pertain to BIPOC students, and more and more. But one thing that we chose to understand was that impactful change can start by small steps. And so we organized a teach-in, and we strive to come up with solutions. One of those would be including more BIPOC author literatures, as they will boost the academic performance of BIPOC students because they will feel more ingrained in the curriculum. That was one of our points of emphasis, and we thought it would be very helpful to share that with you today.
So thank you for our students. We do have a video of that event that I'm just waiting for the students to have a chance to review it. I do want to let Don Bush and Stacia, Don, I don't know if you want to go first, and then Stacia speak to their role with the student equity team.
Good evening. You guys didn't think you would get rid of me that easily, did you? Thanks for having us. As you've heard, a couple of our students, Badri and Sophia just, kind of gave a summary of what they've been working on. And Tuesday we had a great session. Dr. Skelly was on with us, and it was amazing. Julia asked me to come on as advisor a couple of months ago, and I advised AVID students when I was at Aragon. I advised the Black Student Union. This was the easiest advisement I've ever done because these students are so strong. And the last few years at Aragon, and I know throughout the district, we've we started conversations about equity and dealing with racism and underserved students. And, we've had these uncomfortable conversations with staff and with administrators, and we've walked on eggshells, but working with these students and then hearing the teach-in that we just had on Tuesday, I realized that, our students are hurting, right? They're suffering from racism, from, inequities on campus, and they're done with the uncomfortable conversations. They're finished with that. The conversations are not uncomfortable for them because they've been having them, and they're ready for us to catch up with them and turn in what we say, what we have on our mission statement, on all of our school websites. They're looking for us to turn that into action. And I think when that video of that teach-in comes available, you'll see that our students are way ahead of us, and we need to catch up with them and do what we say. So hopefully tonight we'll bring that out a little bit more, and I'll turn this over to Stacia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacia Veal. I am one of the lead wellness counselors here in the district. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm really excited to be here tonight. But my main role with the student equity team, I'm both a support and advisor to this rock star committee. These students have done such powerful work. We meet weekly. We talk about larger conversations, the discussions around concepts that like pro-racist ideology and casual racism and the impacts of racism on mental health. These students have done amazing work. And I'm just really excited that we're here tonight. We have an ability to conversate with you guys all. And I'm really excited to see the fruit of these discussions. And so, yeah, thank you.
So that was part of the journey. It will continue. This group of students plans to continue on working on this, and I've had other groups of adults ask for a teach-in for them. I know our counselors had asked, our academic counselors have asked for that, and then I think we'll probably continue the work with them. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Wu, and she's going to talk about the work we've been doing with the National Equity Project and continue their presentation.
Thank you. And I will just say, Colum and I very briefly had an opportunity, a privilege really, to sit in on a few minutes of the student equity team's planning for the teach-in. And we were just floored by their leadership. And you all have such a powerful group. And I'm so excited to see the work that comes from their leadership and the partnership between the adults in the district and these young leaders. And so we, National Equity Project, have had the opportunity to work with the district starting in the spring of 2019. And we started through some professional development first with coaches, and then the following academic school year, we did some work with classified staff and site administrators.
Was that the one she froze for?
I'm sorry?
You froze when I couldn't hear stuff because you froze. I just want to make sure it might have just been me. If not, I was going to ask you to go back 30 seconds.
Okay, sure. I was saying...
other people, did you hear her?
I heard it all. It didn't freeze for me.
So it's just me. Go on.
Wu did not freeze.
Okay, just continue.
Okay, so we had the opportunity to do some professional development with various groupings in the district, and that work will continue, including our work today with the board, and perhaps more work with the board to move forward, but we'll continue our professional development work with various groups in the district. And in addition to that, the district has also joined a network called the Leading for Equity and Redesign network, which is 9 districts across the United States who are working to deepen their equity work and supporting each other through their membership in this network. And so what we're driving towards through this partnership is a few things. First, developing some shared language and shared commitment towards equity at all levels of the district. And that we really believe that in order to make systemic change, that is a foundational place to build those conditions. So continuing to build conditions and deepen the discourse that's necessary to support true and authentic collaboration and meaningful change. And with that said, really building authentic partnership between adults and staff in the district, but also with students and families, especially the students and families who are most impacted by the inequities in the system. And ultimately, what we are driving towards is greater equity and greater belonging for students who are furthest from opportunity. And so that's a summary of the context. We want to pause and give maybe just 3 to 5 minutes to see if the board have any clarifying questions or any responses to the work that you just heard about.
So we'll just have the board go around with questions or clarifying responses, if you have them. We still have public comment, but we'll take that at the end of your presentation. So Mr. Land, do you have anything? I cannot see the board the way this is set up now, so I'll just call on you.
No, I applaud the work that we're doing. I'm very impressed by it. I think my biggest concern comes in where it's like, we have these great student leaders who are doing magnificent work, but how do we reach the students who either have suffered or are the cause of the suffering, and how do we address that? And I think that's something that, as a principal, as a board member, I constantly debate in my head of how does it get to that next level, because I feel like we're doing some really good work at the board level, at administrative levels, at student leadership levels, but how do we get it to the ground floor and where it's really happening?
Okay, Ms. Lees-Dwyer.
I do. Could we go back a slide? because there was one point that was made. Okay. I have a couple things because I really, I know that this is a beginning, and I know that we have to take baby steps with this because of the fact that we have racial discrimination, we have gender discrimination, we have immigration discrimination, we have religious discrimination, we have disability discrimination. We have people who get discriminated against every day by other people in the schools, people who tease people, people who say things they shouldn't say, who are not sensitive. And I look at it, and I'm looking at the authentic partnership with students and families, especially those impacted by inequities. And I'm hoping that we are going to focus as much on the people who are causing the impact, because I think we really need, we're a teeny little part of a very large simmering national problem. And we need to fix our little part, because if everyone fixes their little part, then over time, this whole thing can change and we can be one good country. But at this, so I'm very, very interested in this topic. And I believe that we really need to educate students and families, all students and families, about the impact that their words, their actions have on other people and other students, and how they treat people. So I'm very, very interested, and I'm hoping that this will be a very strong beginning to a very long-term project. So thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Hanley, do you have anything to add? Question?
Yeah, I think, the equity questions, eventually have to come down to, how are we closing achievement gaps, and how is this work contributing to actually making improvements in the achievement gaps that have plagued this system for decades, really, and where we have not made a lot of progress for a long time. So I think, that's something that we really have to factor into this, because that's where our bottom line is. We're here to educate, and we're here to do that for all students. So I'm looking at, how do we close those achievement gaps, and use this work to contribute to really making progress in that area.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin, anything?
Yeah, just a couple points. One thing Trustee Lees Dwyer commented on, that we would fix our part and everybody else would fix their part. It would be a tremendous success if everybody decided that we all needed to fix our parts and all do it on a consistent basis. I think that there probably are people that either think the problem doesn't exist or it doesn't warrant any attention. So we will fix our part, do the best we can. There are important issues. Do not be surprised if, like everything else in life, there are people who disagree with whatever we think is important. That was the first thing. The second thing I would appreciate, and I had to figure it out, and I still don't know, the BIPOC, which I figured out was people of color, I think. But if you can, the first time you flash an acronym, if you can explain it to us who are less initiated and less familiar with some of the terms, it would certainly help me keep up and not have to Google stuff to find out exactly what's going on. And then Trustee Hanley made some really valid comments about the achievement gap going back decades. I think it goes back in some cases, and I call it a learning gap, where people were denied any educational opportunity, and that created hundreds of years of inequities and just total denial. And we still haven't got over that for many of us. But we're all here. I appreciate the introduction. It looks like there's a lot of energy and a lot of work to do. And I'm losing my voice, so forgive me.
So my comment is in line with the others said. I think is great. I think we have two issues here that you've brought up, and they're related, but they're disparate too. The issue of, treating everyone in the community, treating each other properly with the right language, not using, I'm not good with the words on this, not using the wrong language, respecting each other and so forth, not using hate language and stuff like that. That's issue number one. And I think a lot of the things you're saying on that, I'm very happy to hear our students take the lead on that and so forth. Issue number two is what's in your title, equity. And you just flashed up there a couple quotes, how, the pandemic changes everything and now we can restart. But you really didn't recognize what's going on here with this pandemic. It makes the equity gap so much greater than it's ever been. And you have so much more work now over the next few months to close that equity gap that's been made worse by this pandemic. You need to acknowledge that in your work as you go forward. For example, we saw at our last meeting that over 1,000 of our students don't engage on Zoom. Now, we always have students who don't engage in the classroom, who fall asleep, scribble, whatever, but they're in the classroom and we have a chance to get their attention. But they don't engage on Zoom. That means they're just not there. We can't go in their house, open their notebook and say, start paying attention. There's just no way. These 1,000 kids are going to lose a year of education and their equity is going to be worse. Moreover, not just looking at education equity, looking at general equity in society. If we just look at what's happened because of this pandemic, we might have seen, some of you might have seen from the school perspective, we got a great email. Oh, income tax collections in the state of California are much higher than we projected. So we're going to get all our money, which isn't bad. But why are income taxes much higher? It's because capital gains came through, because the stock market's high. So what's happening is those with resources are not suffering financially in this pandemic. Yet we know that food banks and people who are at the low end of the economic scale are suffering horrendously because our food banks are overwhelmed. They can't, the number of clients they're serving is off the charts. So my point is, when we look at equity and we look at what this pandemic has done, the evidence is 100% clear that it's taken whatever gains we made in 2016, 17, 18, going back to 2000, and made it so much wider. The haves are doing fine. The people who have privilege are doing fine. They're getting an education. Those at the bottom end, whatever the right language is, and you can correct me, those at the bottom end of the economic scale, they're suffering. They're not getting education. Their finances are even worse than they were before. And I just think you have an immense challenge coming out of this pandemic, which hopefully will happen next school year, that we'll all get vaccinated by sometime in the summer so we can have some more semblance of normal, in August of 2021. But your challenge is immense and you need to recognize that. So I'll let you comment unless you want me to take public comment now or you want me to wait. If you're talking, Wu, you're muted.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were addressing me or someone else.
Who's ever, well, you're on my screen. When you share the screen, I don't see everyone.
Yeah.
It's a shortcoming of Zoom.
Yeah.
So I guess it's up to Julia, Dr. Kempke. Who do you want me? What do you want? Where do you want to go?
I think we continue with the presentation because our facilitators from National Equity Project do have, they have a, they have a kind of set presentation. So when they're done, then I think we take the public comment, if that's what your question is.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking, and who's next, if you want to address our questions or just continue the presentation.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say, I appreciate the various points that each of you made. There were many big questions in the questions that you posed, not necessarily, clarifying questions, but really big essential questions that that aren't going to be answered after one conversation. But one thing that I'll say that this is about our presentation tonight is we are hoping to offer a framework that can help you all think about how to address some of these big questions together and how to take a systems approach. Some of you spoke to the just the impact that individuals and the choices that certain individuals in the district, whether it's students or staff, that they're making that are having an impact on the sense of belonging or the overall experience that others are having. And that those experiences undoubtedly are connected to individual choices, and they sit within a system that needs to be addressed. So it's a both and. It's how do we educate, how do we build relationships with others so that they are acknowledging the need to own up to the current and the historical context of oppression. And how do we examine our systems? How do we examine our institution for areas where the institution is actually designed in ways that is allowing for things that are for inequitable patterns and experiences to happen despite positive intent? Because I believe firmly that most educators, almost all educators that I've ever encountered, have had the best of intentions and have wanted to have a positive impact on every student that they work with. And despite that, unfortunately, sometimes our intentions don't match our impact. And so what we want to talk about is how can we take a more global or a systems approach to these very complex problems. And so with that, I'll ask to go to the next slide. And so we are going to talk for a little bit about the 6-7 circle model. And if you go to the next slide, please. I want to invite you all to hold the metaphor of a living system or an ecosystem to think about an organization, that their ecosystems are, like organizations, are complex because there are so many different dynamics and species that are interacting and are interdependent with one another. And so thinking about that on an organizational or a district, in the context of the district, we've got classrooms, we've got schools, there's the district that sits within the state, which sits within the federal system. And within that, we've got students, parents, and educators from all different types of backgrounds coming together within the system and interacting and making choices that are impacting one another. And so Margaret Wheatley and Tim Dalmo and Steve Zweibeck created this model to think about systems work. And they really studied a variety of organizations across the world who were working towards systemic change. And they analyzed what was it that supported some organizations to successfully evolve and change while others failed. And so they, in their work, they uncovered that there are 6 domains that that contribute to an organization's thriving or not thriving. So if you could actually advance a couple, thank you. A couple more, please. One more. Thank you. All right. So they posit that in order for an organization to thrive, it is necessary to attend to all 6 of the circles. And so you'll see that there are 3 circles above a green line, and then there are 3 circles below the green line. And so they explain that most organizations focus the greatest amount of attention on the top 3 circles, which is the technical work. And I'll go a little more in depth into what those circles are in on the next slide. But one of the things that they said is that when an organization is faced with a challenge or a problem, that the problems and the solutions are both technical and relational. And both the technical and relational work needs to be attended to in order to effectively resolve those problems. If you'll go to the next slide, please. And thank you. You can stop there. Or you can go all the way, either way. Thank you. So these are the 3 domains above the green line. So this represents the technical work of systems change. And so patterns speak to the recurring results and phenomena that an organization experiences. And those can be intended or unintended. So an example could be that the district, and I checked this on the dashboard, the state dashboard, the district experiences a 94% graduation rate. And so that is a pattern. Another pattern is that proficiency rates for students with disabilities are lower than proficiency rates for other demographic groups in math. So that's an example of pattern. And then there's structure, and that is the way that the parts of the system are organized in relation to one another. So an example of that might be an organizational hierarchy chart, or the way that subject area departments are organized at the secondary level. And then there's process. Processes are, those are the processes and operations that are used to build consistency and efficiency in the organization. And so one example of that is a uniform complaint policy. If a student or a parent is having a significant issue, they can follow this process in order to get their complaints heard. And then another policy or a process might be how curriculum is adopted in the district. So all of those are examples of the technical work. So then we have the below the green line work, or the relational work of systems change. And so there you have information. And so information connects to the transparency and abundancy of information, and that can lead to increased security and confidence in the organization. On the flip side, if there is a lack of transparency or people do not have access to the information that they feel they need, that can lead to a lack of confidence in the organization and could lead to rumors spreading like wildfire. And so this is not just about one-way communication from the school or from the organization to the constituents. It's two-way or multiple-way communication and access to information. And so one example of that might be in a hiring season, who is invited to be on a hiring team and why they were selected. And having been a principal myself, I definitely know that sometimes there can be emotions that surface for staff members when they haven't been invited to the table, and then assumptions made about why they were not invited and why others were. Whereas if the information was free flowing, some of those assumptions may not need to be formed or may not be formed in the first place. So another domain is relationships, and that's between people, programs, departments, and organizations. And so that speaks to the need to dedicate intentional time to establish and build relational trust and mutual commitments towards collective work. And so one example of how relationships can play out in an organization, there's a ninth grade math team that has really great relationships with one another. And because of the ways in which their relationships support them to work together and collaborate, they have experienced significant achievement gains at the end of the year. Whereas there's a 10th grade math team, and they don't have strong relationships, and their collaboration suffers as a result. And then the result of that might be that the student achievement data in the 10th grade math drops. Identity is another domain, and that's where people are driven by their values, beliefs, and their sense of identity. Every single individual in an organization comes with that. And there's also, as individuals, how they identify, and do they see a space for themselves in the organization? Is there a connection to the identity of the organization? And do they have opportunities to self-reflect, to share their personal beliefs with others in the system, and to really figure out how their individual values connect to the organizational mission, vision, and values? And so one example of where identity may be suffering in an organization might be where most staff are unable to recall even the gist of what the district's mission statement is, because it may not be alive for them. And so I wanted to make some connections to the grand jury report. And so again, this is not an in-depth uncovering of the grand jury report, but wanted to make just a few connections. And so with pattern, there were some patterns that were named in that report around students of color, Jewish students, Muslim students, and LGBTQ students who were experiencing incidents of hate and intolerance. And at times, some of those students expressed experiences where there were staff who seemingly witnessed or observed those incidents and did nothing. Then there's structure. So another thing that might be kind of contributing to the systemic challenge that you all and students are experiencing is the way that secondary education is structured. So in elementary school, for example, students are in one classroom or maybe two classrooms with one or two teachers, and perhaps 35 other students that they get to know throughout the year because they spend their days together. When they become middle and high school students, suddenly the structure changes and their schedules shift where they have 6 or 7 different teachers, and they're changing classrooms every class period. And each class has its own set of 35 students. And by the end of their schedule, they may be coming across 100 different peers every day or every few days. So with process in mind, administrators, so there is a process. And so one thing that struck me when I read the grand jury report is that it wasn't necessarily about a lack of response. I definitely saw reference that there were responses taken. Administrators investigated the incidences of hate and responded according to Ed Code and the school district policy. And yet, there were still, at the end of the day, students who did experience, who felt like not enough had been done. And so that might connect to the information circle, where information from district staff is limited because of privacy rights and a variety of other factors. So then rumors spread about what happened and also about what the school and district did or did not do in response. And so even with the existence of a student handbook, there were still some students and families who were unclear about how to report their experiences with hatred and intolerance. So then we come to relationships. And because of a variety of complex factors playing out, trust gets eroded between students who experience these incidents and staff and the district. And students may not have meaningful opportunities to develop relationships with their peers in their classes because of the structure of the system. And then we go to identity, where the students who are experiencing intolerance may not feel a deep sense of belonging in their school communities. And so schools may also not yet have a shared understanding or a shared commitment around what it means to work towards equity or how to address those incidents that are connected to their work, which may be, I know, again, when I was principaling, sometimes teachers would witness an interaction and they didn't respond because they simply didn't know how to respond. I'm going to pass it over to Colin.
Actually, if you can go back one slide, please. I thought it'd be good just to kind of pause for a moment and see if there are responses or questions to what's been offered, just as we're making meaning of this model of understanding how things play out in a system in these different domains. So maybe we can just take a few minutes to hear if there are any clarifying questions or comments about this model and what you've heard so far.
Anyone have anything, any board member to speak up? Okay, Colm, please continue.
Great, thank you. So as we're thinking about these 6 circles as parts of any living system that interact with one another, if you could go to the next slide, please. We also, what National Equity Project has offered is that all of these sit within a larger circle. We call that the 7th circle, larger social, political, and historical context. And that larger context impacts what happens in each of these circles. So one way of thinking about that, actually, if you go to the next slide, that we're talking about the recognition that there is a history of systemic oppression here, a history of systems of advantage for some and disadvantage for others that have a negative impact on how these things play out, working above and below the green line. So sorry, if you can go back just one more. Thank you. We wanted to just be clear, this is really about it connects to some of the comments that board members have made tonight. The board member that shared that schools there are systems in place that were not always available to every child. Right? Schools were actually not designed originally to educate every child. They were designed first for white boys, right? As we moved on, that changed, but that means there's a history there that impacts what schools were designed for, how they responded to students, et cetera. So the idea of understanding that larger historical, social, political context impacts the relationships people have or don't have, especially across these differences of identity. The ways in which, again, the school is set up to serve a particular set of students who may already have certain privileges. I appreciate the board member's passion about just acknowledging the disparities of privilege and how that's exacerbated in this moment, but understanding how that influences people's connection to the system. And again, how we set things up in ways that might work for some and not for others. And that we need to be bringing that lens to our understanding of what's happening here. So as we're thinking about responding to some of the incidents that were brought up in the grand jury report, some of that is about how policies were implemented, what practices were taking place. But we want to encourage some conversation and thought about what would it mean for a greater shared identity that San Mateo Unified High School District is a district that is about dismantling oppression, that is about working toward interrupting the patterns where some were given advantage and some were disadvantaged, and people have a shared sense of, we know this history has brought us here, and we actually are about setting up a different thing to make sure that we are working toward a more just educational system and a more just society, for example. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We wanted, again, just before I wanted to see if there were clarifying questions about the 6 circles, but we also now want to just invite some discussion about, as you think about what it would take to address the very complex equity issues that have been surfaced in your district. We'd love to hear any thoughts you have about connections to what change might mean considering this 6 and 7 circle. What might it look like to not only address some certain policies, practices, and technical, although those are very important, but to build a greater shared identity, to consider what information needs to be flowing in a different way, to consider what relationships need to be strengthened among people and among different parts of your system. We pause there and just open it up for some conversations.
It's difficult because of the Brown Act, the way you're trying to structure this. We have public comment and so forth. And
yes.
This would be great if we just brought these questions back at the end when it's board comment. I'm sorry about that, but a board meeting isn't like a seminar. There's law, and maybe that's some of your structure issues that you brought up, but we're guided by the law.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that at this point, board members it's not possible for board members to speak to what they heard and make connections to that?
First hear from the public. I have a couple, and then they should do this.
Okay.
That's the law.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Yes. So perhaps we can maybe connect it back, all of this work, again, hoping that this is about shared understanding about how systems operate, to connect it back to some of your mission and vision work and what it would mean for the full system to live that beyond just adopting that kind of policy or those texts, but what it would mean for the system to actually live that in as a whole. Wu, can you take that? I believe that's next, yes?
Yes, it is.
And you can come back, just let me add, you should put these questions up at the end and ask us to address them then.
Thank you. Thank you. So we do want to just offer this one quote by one of the authors of that model, of the living systems model, that the idea that living systems contain their own solution. So as we're thinking about what needs to be done, what change wants to be created, Margaret Wheatley, one of the authors, offers that solution is always about bringing the system together so we can learn more about itself from itself. Somewhere in the system, there are people who are already practicing what others think is impossible. To make a system healthier, we need to connect it to more of itself. This is crucial to remember in organizations. We are working with webs of relations and not with machines. And so obviously we know that all of you are clear about the complex human dimension of this and want to just reiterate that important piece about what it means to actually bring the system together in different ways, connect in different ways, that is about the human connection, the human information flow, the human sense of shared identity, in addition to the structures, policies, and practices. Just wanted to end on that note.
Thank you. Actually, would you go back to that slide? I hadn't planned on sharing this, but when one of the board members, I am not recalling exactly who, I think it was Mr. Hanley, talked about that question about how are we closing achievement gaps? And that is a huge question. And I wanted to just take a moment and speak to my own experience as a high school student that maybe can help illustrate the complexity of that question and how it connects to the 6-7 circle model. And so I attended Lowell High School about 25 plus years ago. And my freshman year was the year that there were some Chinese parents and students in the district had brought suit against San Francisco Unified because of the affirmative action program that was in place at Lowell that allowed for Black and Latino students, Latinx students, to have lower test scores to qualify for admission to attend Lowell. So I myself was a mixed race, Black and Chinese student. And when I started, my reception at the school was, I was not welcomed. And there were no Black students at that school were welcomed. And in my classes, there were teachers and students, and there were parents who it seemed like everybody in the community was saying very explicitly, you do not belong here. And for me, as a Black student, the impact of that was I wanted to disappear. I didn't have significant relationships with my peers or with any of my teachers because they were telling me, we don't want you here. And I didn't do extremely poorly in school, but I didn't do well either. And that was not because I lacked the ability to do well. I would say by the time I was in the 11th grade, I had a 2.9 GPA. And so, mostly B's and C's. And I I didn't speak up in my classes. I was invisible as far as many of my teachers and peers were concerned. Then in my senior year, I took this class. It was called Peer Resources. And my teacher really prioritized the below the green line work with students. And we did some deep community building and talked about that seventh circle, that historical, social, political context, and talked about things like racism. And students had space in the class to talk about their experiences. It was the first time in my 3.5 years at Lowell that I had experienced a place of belonging and acceptance. And I remember that semester I had started applying to colleges, and I didn't believe that I was going to get into any good colleges, but my dad forced me to apply to, I applied to San Francisco State and UC Berkeley. And I remember after being in that class, I had the courage to write about my experience as a Black student in the school. And for the first time, I started to get some hope that I might move on to college. And I decided that the next semester, I was going to get straight A's. And I've never in my life had I ever gotten straight A's, but I was like, you know what? I know I can get straight A's. And I did. And it was a choice. And it was supported because of the relationships that were built. And so it wasn't because of any academic deficits that I was holding, but it was because of so much of that below the green line stuff. And I know that there are students who have significant gaps in their education. And so I don't want to minimize that. This was my experience, though, that it wasn't the technical work that needed to support my achievement. It was that relational work. And it was having an acknowledgement that what I was experiencing was not okay and that it wasn't my fault. So I just wanted to share that and then transition to a couple slides forward to San Mateo's vision and mission, or this was the equity vision and mission that you all passed last spring that Julia referenced earlier. I don't need to tell you about that because you passed it. But I wanted to just give you a moment to put your eyes on this. And I want to just say, you know, I think Julia alluded to this earlier, but this is powerful. You all took a really powerful step in the direction of identity, in deciding that this is something that we believe and something that we as a district are committed to working towards. And so the question that we wanted to pose, and I guess this is a good time to start the transition into the public comment and then opportunity for you all to respond. But if you can advance 2 slides, please. So I wanted to pose this question for your consideration and later discussion, which is, with the grand jury report and students' experiences with intolerance and our greater current societal context in mind, what connections are you making between your sphere of influence as a board and the potential actions that you all at your level can take to ensure that this equity mission and vision are lived and felt by students at the site level? So I'll pause there and give you a moment to just reflect on that, and then I will turn it over to whoever I need to turn it over to open up that public comment. And
That's me. So we just have a couple people to comment, then the board can go around and comment. And we just follow the normal thing. So first I'd like to call on our how many student board members do we have here, Ms. Chalkley?
We do have two. We have Ellie Yoon and Jessica Sharma. So they're here. And then it's my understanding that we have one public comment on this item.
Yeah, so we'll have this two student board members, the public comment, then the board members.
Can we go back to gallery view?
Yeah, this is what makes it hard without gallery view. I can get to it. But it's good to see that question because I think it's an important question. Okay. So I have to share a screen. Oh, fuck.
Dude, language.
Sorry. There we go. Just having trouble with the share. Guess I have a good mic. So student board member.
Hi, I can go first. So by the way, guys, my name is Ellison, and I am a junior at BHS. So in terms of potential actions, I think that the district board can make, I know that a lot of our schools right now have been establishing it in response to the grand jury report, and even prior to that, a lot of schools have been establishing organizations or commissions within their leadership programs at our schools to address these sort of issues and address more right now of the informational piece that, and making strides towards in educating our students about different cultures and just problems regarding equity and equality at our schools. And right now, they also are hoping that they have the potential to expand to other issues, not just informational, but in addition to potentially making student boards or panels to discuss these issues when they do happen. So I know a lot of our schools are making taking those actions as well, but I know that our schools will definitely continue to expand these discussions and these, I guess, like these panels to address and make our students feel more comfortable.
Thanks. And the other student board member is she here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, Linda. I did join a little late, so I'm not 100% sure, but I can definitely just go off of what Elenice was saying. And I definitely agree that a lot of like the schools have really been diving more into topics like this and just kind of being aware of just everything that's going on. A lot of students have shared their personal problems just with equity and equality. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. Sorry, I joined a little late.
And then I'm going to call on Miss Ligia Andrande Zuniga, who would like to make a little comment on this. She's taking my place in 2 weeks, and her video doesn't work, I'm told, but that's okay. You can just talk.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ligia Andrade Zuniga. I'm one of the board trustee elect, as President Friedman has said. Yes, unfortunately, my camera is strange today, but I wanted to get a chance to talk, to speak on, well, the grand jury report and the presentation today. I read over the grand jury report, and although it makes me very sad, I'm not surprised. I think that we've had a lot of instances that have not been addressed, and it's exploded. And this is consequence of, just like the presentation has shown, a lot of systemic and a lot of just problems that have been trickling down the generations and the years. Now, this is not unrepairable. I am so excited to join the board because I have so many ideas, and I'm really just blown away by the presentation. I think right on. This is right in line with a lot of the work that I've done in the community and in my own life. As a new board member, and I'm going to say this also coming from the experience of being on other boards and commissions. Since we are a governing board and we govern this district, we ourselves need to also examine and unpack the ideas, the experiences, and the opinions that we have that have come down along the lines of this presentation. We are human and we all have our own things to examine. So I really implore our board to, along with our community, along with our district, do the work that it takes to be able to understand this work. It's not easy, it's not pleasant, but it's not impossible. And we need to listen. I mean, our students are saying we need this. Our families are saying we need this. So yes, this all has to do with the achievement gap. This all has to do with the opportunity gap. It's not, it shouldn't be a surprise. So I am so excited. Like I said, congratulations to the, to the people who have presented today. And I, again, am really excited to join the district. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Land, are you there?
I am. Lihia, congratulations. Welcome aboard. We can't wait to have you on board. That's awesome. I do want to make a note of what we have done as a board. We have been a part of the Equity Network with the San Mateo School Boards Association, and it has been active work that really has made us all dig a little deeper, including our district staff as well. My biggest concern at this point, and just in the reflection, knowing, actually I have worked with the Equity Project in my district in Los Altos and in Redwood City, so I have some awareness of the 6 circles of technical and relational work, and I really appreciate the in-depth discussion right now and how it applied to the grand jury. I think that was really insightful. I think one of the things that stuck out with me so much as a principal is the when we had that the six squares in blue and in reference to the grand jury, and one of them was talking about the policy. I mean, as a principal, I'm very much aware of that legalistic response of investigate and work on, and what it whole time misses is that restorative practice of getting victim and perpetrator together and help with the education that needs to take place and evolve. And I think that's a great example of what needs to happen, because if we don't get these students together and understand perspectives and understand what has happened and the effect that has been going on, we can't restore the problems that exist. I really appreciate that we are committed to evoking change. I think that is critical at this point. I want to say that there's multiple levels. Mark, I really appreciate what Mark had to say in the outset about all the challenges of what is existing right now and the problems that do exist and how it is systemic and how we have so multiple different levels of inequities that are taking place. I do want to praise the board for trying its best to work on those inequities, whether it's economic or racial, but I know we have more work to do. And I really appreciated the idea of the student voice. That was critical tonight. Listening to the student leaders talk about what is going on and how they educated our administrative staff and how we can continue that empowerment is critical. I think for me, one of the hardest things is that 7th circle, that outside pressure that is taking place in our society today. I think a lot of the problems that happened in the jury report and what's happened in Burlingame and the incidences that were pointed out is a direct result of the 7th circle and this oppression that is taking place. And I think, yes, it'd be wonderful to get us to make and keep the movement that we're doing and change that it needs to happen. But I also, how do we impact in our local society as well? Racism, homophobia is a learned behavior. And how do we break that learning? And I think that's something that is critical to having any change. And that's also community. I think it goes beyond just our district, but goes into our communities as well. And we need to have a role in that as well. So I think, I challenge us as board members, as community, members, as students, that we have to take this beyond just the schools and into our communities as well to make any significant change. I'd like to circle back later, but that's where I'm going to stop.
That's fine. So just remind me to recognize you later, please. Ms. Lees Dwyer.
Okay. I guess you already know that I see this as a very big problem in many different areas, and you know, racism, immigrants, religion, you name it, someone can get bullied about it, gender. And I think that, you know, this really, we're talking about bullying as much as we are talking about racism and everything else. But I think that the bullying that happens in the schools among students is incredibly harmful. And this is one of the reasons we're looking at this, is that this happens, and it happens every day, and it happens to many students for many different reasons. I really believe that focusing below the green line is incredibly important. And I like what Wu had to say about that. The house model at Hillsdale was, I recall reading that it worked better than any of our other efforts that we have been doing, you know, in the recent past. And I can understand that because they create a small community within the house. And I think then students come to know each other better and to work together better. And so I think, you know, we already have that going in one school, and that's something we should look at in other schools to create. You don't have to create separate buildings, but we could look at having more of the homeroom concept, which back when school was first created and I was in it, we did have homeroom, and you went to homeroom, you had a homeroom teacher, you got to know the students in homeroom. You know, it was a different thing. And I know that that is something that is valued in the house model. We were really focused on ethnic studies, and I believe very much in ethnic studies, and I believe that we can do a lot with ethnic studies. But before we get to ethnic studies, I think we have to address the bullying and picking on each other and these negative behaviors that impact so many students, and it impacts their learning. And I really agree with Wu on that too. Yeah, you know, I think if everyone, when someone says something that they shouldn't say, they're in a class, and if it happens, fortunately, in a classroom, the answer is, we do not talk like that here. We accept each other. We value all that each of us brings to our school. That's it. Stop it immediately. And we could use the leadership students to emphasize that mantra, that we value everyone here. We don't talk like that. And I think students, once they learn that the culture has changed, that kind of behavior is just unacceptable. We don't do it. I think we can do that. I think we can really work hard to try to change that culture and move students and teachers and all of us into an kind of a new day, because after COVID, we're going to have a new day. So I would hope that this would be part of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hanley.
So I want to talk about this from a little larger perspective, because I think, you know, you need to understand it from a little larger perspective. And I've said in previous meetings that I spent really the last 20 years working on these issues, and education reform and bringing this system which serves students so poorly and families so poorly, especially minority students, students with low incomes so poorly, and has done so for decades. And as Mr. Griffin mentioned, actually for 100 years, maybe 200 years. It's a system that's completely dysfunctional. It's defective at its core. And I think if you can't look at it that way and look at how broken it is, how much it needs reform, you don't really understand, how much the need for change is in it. And this board, in the mission statement that that you saw on the screen a few minutes ago, where this board has actually stepped up and said, we want to disrupt this system. And that's very unusual particularly in a California school board, because there's not much disruption going on in traditional public education in California. I spent a lot of time. I created the Oakland Charter School Collaborative that worked with 30 charter schools in Oakland. I founded Commission on Faith-Based Schools. It was really the first organization that brought together Christian, Catholic, Islamic schools, Orthodox Jewish schools, a range of Lutheran schools, all under one rooftop to promote families that wanted to choose those kinds of schools, and advocated for them. I've created 4 charter schools. I've advocated for change in legislation in Florida, New York, Texas, Oklahoma, California in the last 10 years. So I bring a lot of perspective and experience to these remarks tonight. When I talk about that through the years, Asians, Hispanics, African Americans, Roman Catholics, Jews, they've all been mistreated by this education system, and we're not doing a lot better right now. And I think we can do so much better if we just start to wake up to the kinds of changes that we need, and we start to tell each other the truth about the system, and we start to stand up to the status quo forces. We have to stop allowing the status quo to govern our public education system. We have to stop allowing seniority rules to put our least experienced teachers in front of our students most in need. That's just one example. We have to put systems that allow us to evaluate teachers effectively. We have to look at things that were brought forward a few years ago in the Vergara case, where there's massive evidence of ineffective teaching going on in schools that were heavily populated by low-income students, minority students, and we were not able to do anything about the quality of teaching. So when we don't allow accountability measures, we've effectively removed almost all of our accountability measures in the state. We give one test in the entirety of high school right now, and it's given at the end of the junior year. Well, the effectiveness of that is almost zero. It's too late, but it comes back at the beginning of your senior year. So you don't have any measure whereby you can really remediate your loss of learning. You've taken accountability out of your school system at the high school level. And you have to ask yourself, well, why did that happen? Well, it happened because the status quo forces in in education don't want accountability in the system. And this is not beneficial for anybody. And it's certainly not beneficial for the students that most need high quality education. So we have to look at a system that has started out and founded on, you know, racism and neighborhoods. I mean, we allowed our neighborhoods to be redlined and have restrictions on property sales. These things continue right today, and then we don't allow our school districts effectively we don't allow our families to change school districts. So our families have very little choices. And then when we come up with a system that maybe gives them some choices, like charter schools, the forces of status quo are trying to actively shut down as much as possible charter schools in California and limit them so that families have fewer and fewer choices and opportunities to move around and find good schools and when good schools are created, it's harder and harder to replicate those schools. So there's fewer and fewer choices of good schools being created. So this whole cycle is creating fewer and fewer opportunities for families. If we don't make some changes in the way that the system operates, we're never going to really break this cycle of poor kids, of minority kids, not really getting the opportunities that they really deserve. So, you know, there are some things that we can do in this district to disrupt the system. The pandemic, as we said in the early part of the presentation, maybe opened some doors. For instance, maybe we should look at a longer school day, maybe a longer school year to help start recover some of this learning loss. Maybe we should look at how we can do tutoring in a different way, in a more intense way. Maybe there should be a different way of looking at the school year entirely. Why are we continuing to shut down schools for 10 to 11 weeks during the summer? Maybe this is finally the time that we look at a different school year so that we eliminate the kind of learning loss that we have every single year when we close schools for 10 or 11 weeks, as if our kids are going off to milk cows and plant corn. None of our kids are going off to plant corn and milk cows. This is the time to reevaluate whether it really makes sense to close schools for 10 or 11 weeks in the summertime. It's time to assess whether we need common evaluations, common tests. We need to restore those in our schools. We need to be able to make assessments on a regular basis of how our students are doing across our schools in the important subjects. And we need to get those going in the 9th and 10th grades, probably in the 11th grade also, and get those started again so that we have a better assessment of how our students are doing more than just grades in single classes on one-off classes. We need to consider whether we should advocate with our assembly representatives and with our state senators, whether it should be mandatory that basic aid districts, community funded districts have to reimburse each other when students transfer between the districts, so that we open up the ability of families to transfer between districts. We also need to consider whether we should advocate that when students want to come to our district, that we should get LCFF funding from that district to help allow us to take their students on a better basis, so that it makes it easier for families to come to other districts. This would open up choice in California. And we have Cappuccino High School, which our projections are that enrollment is going to decline over the next 5 years. There are students that want to come to Cappuccino High School. We should come up with a way that they can come to Cappuccino High School from other districts. This is a way that we could consider taking more students in Cappuccino. Mills is also. So we need to open up the system so that we can serve more students, allow families to make better choices, allow families to have more choices in education. There are a number of ways that the system can be opened up so that you can streamline credentialing, so that you get more minorities interested in teaching. The credentialing system's a nightmare. It's extremely expensive. There's a whole range of issues that go to the types of things that we're talking about that make it more equitable for education and would substantially start to change and improve the system. But we need to start telling each other the truth about the system and start handling the truth and allow us to move forward in a much more equitable manner.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Griffin.
Sorry, I was muted. I got a couple of points. One thing is interesting, and I can't, we had an event and I reported out on it for Black African-American mixed race students, parents, stakeholders. And I was one of the speakers there. And there was a particularly difficult, and the superintendent, or Ms. Chalkley, or I think the whole cabinet was there. There was a particularly difficult question. And in all honesty, I thought the superintendent was going to take it. And it had to do with how come we aren't moving any faster to get change put in place, meaningful change. Superintendent, was that the essence of the question? Are you there?
Mayor, I was just muted like you were. I do remember that question, and I don't remember what I said.
But, you said, Trustee Griffin, that might be that perhaps you might take that question. Everybody who was there, correct me, but I ended up answering that question, and I'm not I'm not an education wonk. I'm a fairly practical guy, and I said it was the ed code and the laws and regs is what slows down progress and change in the system. The volumes and volumes of rules about why we can't do things, how we have to do things, and and that is kind of steeped in tradition. And I think that is a context And Ms. Shockley, is that an accurate, because you have a pretty good recall, was that reasonably accurate about the comment and the response?
I believe so.
I think that's where the root cause of this is. Now, another thing that I've got some notes, and this sort of is that sphere of influence, potential actions. The board really embraced ethnic studies, and we were there, and there was not this, I think everybody was on the same page on that. We also told, in our infinite wisdom, we thought the superintendent ought to take some equity training, and he did. And as it turned out, we all participated because we all thought that it was an important issue. And I remember sitting through those classes in that cold conference room, or those sessions, not classes, but those sessions, and I benefited immensely. The other thing that we've talked about, and we had a funding agreement, and I said, okay, we need to stop funding the police, and this is not a defund the police moment here from that perspective. What I was really concerned about is about the social, emotional welfare of the students on campuses and how you can bring everybody, back into a circle and make everybody welcome and deal with their needs. I want to examine not just the one agreement that we pay for, but all the agreements. How do we deal with adversity, differences, disputes, those kind of issues? There's some really basic problems here, and I don't know where they go in this hierarchy. I've got the seven circles and 3 circles, and I've been trying to analyze how this all works. We have to deal with, and this is probably individuals on their own basis, there's esteem issues with many people in society. This goes generationally, that people lack self-esteem, they lack confidence, they're not welcome. That really does impact people's self-esteem. And I think it holds back their potentiality, if that's the proper term. And I think we need to deal with that. And you see that a lot on small bases that, and this kind of goes back, I was thinking about this walking my dog, to Black pride in my case, and Black power, and where you had a concept and you felt like you had the power to change, you had the power to do things. The problem with that was society thought it was a threat. In some cases, it was a personal violent threat, but it was also a psychological threat, I think. So, but I think we need to deal with those issues. That's probably the only other thing I could think of that's worthy of comment is how we attract students for so many generations that tracking, I'm sure it probably goes back to the beginning of formalized education. But I think about myself at San Mateo and how so many the vast majority of African-American students got tracked into general ed and shop. And there was so many, there was so much talent and so much potential lost there. Those are my brief comments.
Okay, thank you. So just in listening to my fellow board members, I'm struck, it's really almost 2 issues. We're talking about, the way school districts are structured and how that just reinforces inequity in achievement. That's one issue. And I'm not going to spend, I think my fellow board members have spent enough time on that. But what I want to talk about is, the other thing that was discussed, just the interpersonal relationships and the issues that go on our campus and the presentation on that. And I think the presentation was very powerful, and I'm really grateful that we have students who recognize that these issues are occurring on our campuses, and I assume they also recognize what occurs on our campuses isn't just campus specific. It's really occurring, throughout our cities and our neighborhoods and so forth. The people who's ever doing these things that are like discussed in the grand jury report aren't just coming and doing it at Burlingame High. They're also doing it in the city of Burlingame, in the town of Hillsborough. It goes it's in our schools and we need to address it, but it goes beyond our schools. And when I'm trying to think about this seventh circle, and I think about the community I live in, which is the Burlingame Hillsborough community for the last 25 years, I can't, in my mind, how many different racists from people I've interacted, racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and other hate comments that I've overheard or people said without much thought, how it's just in our community and it's just there. And, it's, it's not, I'm not saying like, oh, you look to your left, look to your right, there's going to be one of those people who's going to make comments like that. But there's a substantial number, and that's how it gets communicated down to the students who bring it on our campus. And we shouldn't be surprised about this. As one of my fellow board members said, there's a broad history of systemic oppression in this part of the county. We had, especially I think in Burlingame, Hillsborough, we had covenants on deeds and so forth that someone mentioned that prevented certain groups from living in the houses we now live in. I was always amazed. There's a famous author who grew up in Burlingame and went to Burlingame High, Shirley Jackson. You might have heard of her from like the 40s. She was here during World War II in the 40s. Her first novel, she wrote a lot of famous novels, interesting novels in the 50s. Her first novel was based on the prejudice that she saw in Burlingame and Hillsborough while she was growing up. And it's a famous novel. So it's in our history, and we have to address that, and just not say, we have to address that it's woven in throughout the people who've lived here forever, because cultures and norms are passed on from generation to generation. And so I see that, and I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about the seventh circle. And when we do that, that means I think, we can do what we can do. And I'm really grateful that our students are addressing it. But we also got to get the city of Burlingame to address it, the town of Hillsborough, the Burlingame Elementary School District, the Hillsborough City School District, the San Mateo Foster City School District. All these districts need to address this. We'll make progress if we do it on our own, but if we don't advocate it for it to be a broader based thing, it won't end. And that's what I have to say. Greg wanted to come back to him, but I also want to allow the presenters to react to what they heard. I'll let Greg, do you want to come back now or want to let the presenters react?
I can wait. I'd like to hear what they have to say, but I really appreciate my fellow board members' speeches.
Any comments from our facilitators? Try to answer your questions.
Thank you. I'll get it started. I just want to appreciate all of it sounds like a very shared clarity about the systemic nature of this, which is not always the case, just to be very explicit about with groups that we're working with. And so that's an important piece of this. And I think what we'd want to encourage is some meaning making together about where's the board's sphere of influence to be able to influence some of the technical pieces of policies, practices, and structures that actually could enhance greater shared identity about being an equity-focused organization, could enhance relationship building across identity differences and across communities, and could enhance kind of two-way information about what's needed to feel more like a just community in schools and in the district overall. So just want to leave with that thought about where your sphere of influence is most powerful, and how you may be able to find ways to both support the technical ways that could actually enhance and strengthen some of the below the green line elements.
Thank you. Did you still want to add something, Greg, or?
I think Wu is.
I think Wu wanted to talk.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's hard. Go on.
All right. I won't talk long, but I just appreciate also so much of what you all shared, and that there's a sense of shared commitment and agreement about the importance of acknowledging that seventh circle and how it has historically played out and is continuing to influence lived experiences. And so a couple of things that I heard, and this is not to say that you all are in agreement about it, but some of you mentioned tracking and how that is leading to inequitable outcomes. And so that's one area for potential further discussion. And I heard one of you talk about school choice and which students are able to enroll in which schools. And that's certainly another big issue to which I'm sure you all have had conversations about before. And another thing that really struck me is just how this extends into the community. And so thinking about your spheres of influence, your sphere of influence collectively as a board, and how you can influence policy, which is, more the technical stuff of what happens in the district, but also thinking about your spheres of influence in the community and how you might think about your individual work. I think one of you spoke to that as well. This is about our ongoing journey of educating ourselves and doing our own work, and also of how are we tapping into our networks and connections in the community so that we are listening to other people and figuring out, that identity circle of how are we building shared commitment, and how are we bringing what we've heard to the table so that we can consider all of the complexity in the decisions that we have to make together as a board. So I'll stop there.
So does any other, Greg, do you want to speak? It's 7:45 and we have one more item.
I hear you, and I'm going to be quick. I think one thing that needs to be emphasized to our speakers and to just everyone in general is how the board is very committed to disrupting what we already have. And we know that we're willing to make that change. I think we've tried to emphasize that to the superintendent, and I think we need to make sure that we understand that that is what we are committed to. Not just for changing the system in general for implicit bias, but also what Peter keeps harping on, which is the achievement gap, making change, radical change, so that we are serving all our students, the most vulnerable students, the ones who have economic needs. I mean, this is an opportunity. And I think this pandemic has really, like Mark has highlighted many times, it is really pointed out and made worse the situations and the disparities that we have. And it is an opportunity, as the speaker said at the very beginning, to make radical change. We can do things differently, but we need the strength and the wherewithal to say, yes, we're going to do it. I think that's where I would hope our speakers hear what's happening and where we're at. I think at the top, we see change and we see the opportunities, even at the schools, we see it at the top. But the institutionalized systems, like we were talking about, like was highlighted earlier with the following the investigative report and doing it a certain way, it really is hindering us from making this change real and change from a personal level, on the relational level. And I think that is something that has to go deeper, and that is every school individualized. And it's so hard right now because we're doing this online. I mean, this has to be in person, and this has to happen over time. So that's kind of, and I won't go any, I'll stop there.
Does anyone else on the board wish to speak, or should we move on to item D1? Linda, you got to speak.
I just have a quick comment. I was really moved by Wu's story. of her personal experience and what happened, because I think, like it or not, that's been the story for a lot of students in small ways and large ways. And I think that, the individual hurts add up, the little wounds. And I think we really, the students, I believe, are our ambassadors to the community. It's through the students that the community will change, that people will change. That's where the change has to begin. And with them being involved in this and wanting this and looking for opportunities with leadership to do this, I see that we can actually do something. And I don't want to be a board that just talks, because we can talk about all of these different things and not get anything done. So I'm really encouraged by the students and their leadership. I'm encouraged by the district's focus on mental health, because I think that focus kind of positions us to move forward, to end all discrimination, racism, all of it, to do what we can to make change, and through our students. So that's my comment.
Okay, is everyone else, Bob, Peter, okay? So I'm gonna, do you have anything to add, Dr. Kempke? Can we close this item from a person?
I just want to appreciate that we've started the conversation at this level, and the student group will continue to meet. And as Wu and Colum and Dawn and Stacia mentioned about that group of students, is that they're really not comfortable. I mean, they're really comfortable talking about race and talking about these issues and talking about what's getting in the way of their learning. And from them, I think we'll be able to bring back some really tangible strategies going forward. But it is important that, as we've heard tonight, that we're having these conversations about how all of our systems work together and how we can think about each one of those pieces and making the change that we need to see happen. And part of the first step is to start talking about it in a productive kind of generative way, which I appreciated we did tonight. So thank you. I want to thank Wu and Colum for being here. And I know this next item, I think, Dr. Scully, are you going to take us, start us off here?
So you're all, I'm just going to close the item and then go.
Thank you.
We're done. Thank you. And thank you to Wu and Colum. I appreciate all the time you spent with us. You can stay for it. You can leave. Your call. So we're on item D1, approval of a response to the grand jury report on hated schools, opportunity lost. Dr. Skelly, you or Dr. Black?
Yeah. Why don't I start here? Let me say that,
let you know, we have 3 public speakers. So you guys, administration, say what they want. Then I'm going to recognize the public speakers, and then the board will talk about it. So we understand process.
right. So as the board knows, because typically grand juries have looked at high school activities over the years. There is an expectation that the district provide a response to that report. Typically, that's done out of Dr. Black's office. We receive support from the San Mateo County Council's office on the writing of that. Typically, like this one, although we were the focus of this, many of the parts of this grand jury report, it is influenced by all. It has reports that are responses that are due from each of the school districts in the county. And so we asked county council to write it, and then they typically answer some of the questions in what in legal ways, right? It's not a it is a legal response that we have here. And in some ways, to go back to use, there was a method in having this conversation first with the National Equity Project, because it is sort of below the line, relational kind of work. And then what we're giving you tonight is a technical response to those questions that lists some of that work. And so we wanted to do that work first and then take on what is more of a technical issue. The board has time to look at this. I believe the report, Dr. Black, you can give the exact date when you talk here. but you have time to look at this. The idea is that you would get this if we will bring it back to you based on your comments tonight for approval, either on the consent agenda or on the regular agenda at a future meeting. But this is a response. This is a typical way that you do this, is that staff writes a response, the board gets it, and then it's approved, and then it's sent as a response before the deadline happens. So I think I'll stop. We've got staff who can answer questions here, and we're anxious to hear from you and the public.
Did you want to add something, Dr. Black?
The date for the reply is December 23rd, and it is broken down in findings and recommendations. The findings, we typically we agree with the findings, and then with the recommendations, as has been said earlier, a lot of this has already been in process, and we have pretty detailed plans on moving forward. And then we have a whole revision to our responding and reporting to hate-motivated incidents and crimes attached to the response.
Okay, if there's any clarifying questions from the board, I'll take them now before I go to public comment. I see Ms. Lees-Dwyer shaking her head. I don't see any clarifying questions, so I'm going to go to public comment. I have 3 public comment: Gamzee, Eccles, Joelle Kaufman, and then Ms. Andrade. Zuniga will speak again. Gamiz, you're first.
Hi, thank you for having me here. As you guys know, I spoke earlier and I've been really involved with like all the meetings going on, just trying to get my voice to be heard. I want to share about like my experience as a POC student at Burlingame High School, just to give you guys a little bit of insight from a student's perspective. I come from a Muslim and Middle Eastern background, and countless times when I walk through the halls of my school, I will hear students screaming, Allahu Akbar. And this isn't just disrespectful, but also extremely racist. They use it with a negative and degrading connotation and would shamelessly look at me at times while saying it. And even though I've experienced this more times than I can count, not one time have I seen or heard a teacher confront these students. And the staff at my school is predominantly Caucasian, so I feel as though that they aren't equipped with the skills to confront racism. And I'm sick and tired of seeing students being the subject of racism and them depending on teachers to defend them in a stressful situation, just for that teacher to turn a blind eye because of the fact that they are uncomfortable. But staff need to learn how to get uncomfortable and deal with the racism the moment they see it, because I have to endure being uncomfortable every single day because students aren't being told what they are doing wrong. My junior year, I had a friend who came to school wearing a monochromatic blue outfit. Keep in mind that she is Latina, and let's call her Susie for the sake of the story. During lunch one day, she was standing by a staff member when one of her friends jokingly yelled out, "Hey, Susie, why are you wearing all blue?" And as many of you may know, blue is a color that's affiliated with a gang that's popular in our area. Of course, the student was joking, but the staff member asked Susie, "Yeah, why are you wearing all blue?" This staff member was clearly questioning whether my friend was gang affiliated or not, and which is utterly disgusting, just because of the fact that she is Latina and was wearing the color blue. If another student who is Caucasian was wearing that same exact outfit, that staff member would not have reacted the way that she did. So when I hear admin ask how they can connect with students so that they will come forward when they have been racially targeted, I would tell them this. First, you need to see the issues and flaws in your own staff and teach them that it is crucial for them to get uncomfortable and confront racism when necessary. Second, teachers themselves need to break away from these racist and stereotypical ideologies, because how can a student trust the school when they're the ones who are targeting the students and turning a blind eye in the face of racism? I am absolutely fed up with how racism is being dealt with at my school, and I'm here getting uncomfortable once again to raise awareness on how toxic the environment at BHS is, so that future students do not have to endure the same things that I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Joelle, Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the board members and the administration. I am speaking to you having read the response, and I appreciate Dr. Skelly, that it is a legal structure. So my first two comments are that on page 13 in the penal code, while I was surprised to see any mention of narcotics or controlled substances, because I don't think that's part of a hate speech problem, of course you would report that to the police. I did not see any mention of destruction of property, and the hate incidents at Burlingame High School in the last 18 months, both were graffiti oriented, destruction of property. I believe that is also something that should be included as something to report to law enforcement. On page 14, the language in the staff responsibilities, it says share responsibility for creating an environment where students and staff know that hate motivated incidents and crimes will not be tolerated. It would be excellent if we also expected them to create an environment of compassion, a climate where the tone is set at the top of compassion, of seeing the value in each individual, because that creates an environment where hate can't thrive. My last point, which was missing from the whole document, and applies to the equity conversation as well as this one, is there are no target metrics, there's no commitment to transparency, and there is no quarterly commitment to reviewing progress. What is progress towards equity and progress towards no hate or hate-free environment? Are we going to have analytics saying how many reports were made to the anonymous tip line? How many were reported by the administration to the board? Are we holding the administration responsible when there is a incident to report what the communication plan was, how was it executed, and what is the restorative justice plan, given that there was an incident? And are we looking every quarter to say, what is our volume? Is it increasing or decreasing? And what are we doing about it? You get what you measure. And by setting a standard, both on the equity conversation and on the hate speech of measurement, you will improve focus. And by improving focus, you will improve outcomes, which I think is our shared goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Lagia.
Hello, everyone again. So I am in agreement with Ms. Kaufman. There needs to be some way of measuring the progress that we make. However, the problem is people that aren't able to report what they're experiencing, and how do we measure that? There are several instances that I know of personally from different students that just did not feel comfortable expressing what they've experienced or expressing what they've seen and heard. And so that like, where do we bring those people that have experienced that, and they're afraid? There's going to be that percentage of people as well. And then what does the metric look like? Like, what does it look like to do better? And I'm going to go back to the presentation from earlier. I mean, it has to do with the top down, and I'm so glad that I'm going to be part of a board that did pass a vision and a mission of creating an inclusive community, and that does value people. I am glad that Ms. Kaufman brought up appreciating people for who they are as individuals. As I don't believe in being colorblind. I don't believe in ignoring those. As just, I believe that we're all human and we're all part of one community. But let's celebrate who we are and what we bring to this community. But yeah, I think that there has to be a place, an anonymous place, for people to be able to communicate what they've just experienced. And again, coming onto the board as a new member, this is for a longer dialogue on how we are going to measure this. But I got the same out of this report.
Thank you. Do either of the student board members want to comment on the report? Ms. Yoon?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I don't have much to say, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that you're absolutely right. I do feel like we should have some sort of outlet for students to come express when they do feel uncomfortable, or they do feel that there was an inappropriate comment or action made towards them. Because I think that our students, at least at BHS, they feel as though they don't really know where to go or who to talk to, or even if it was a big enough deal to go talk to someone, if a comment like this was made towards them by a student or by a teacher, by anybody. So I do feel like we should try to make some a space for students to be able to express their discomfort. And I also feel like we should have a space to educate students what is appropriate to say or not, because I do believe that there is some sort of gray line for a lot of our students, and a lot of our students have been raised with certain, or just exposed to certain language and humor that is no longer appropriate, or hasn't ever been appropriate, but they have, excuse me, sorry, they have been aware, they have been raised as though it is all right to say, and we need to educate students what is no longer okay to say in these educational areas.
Thanks. Ms. Sharma, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I can add on to it. I agree that there does need to be some sort of way for the students to communicate anonymously to admin or board about what's going on, just because I feel like face to face, it's very difficult to come and to talk to counselors about what's really happening, because then eventually somebody's going to know that, you know, you told somebody at a higher level, and then it just gets into a lot more. But personally, like even walking down the hallway, oh, never mind. Well, when walking down the hallway at school, I've just heard a lot of comments and slurs that personally I've had to speak up to students about it, and to tell them that, you know, things are not okay to say. And I'm Indian, both of my parents are immigrants, and I have personally been told a lot of slurs too, just very negative things. And see, I've never really even had the courage to report it. So I definitely think that if we had an anonymous way to report things, that would really be helpful, because I understand what it's like to get slurs and not really say anything about it. Also, I do think that I agree, like there has to be something that we have to talk to the students about what's okay to say and what really isn't okay to say, because students that are saying things could personally never have had anything said to them, so they really don't know what it's like to be on the other side of things. And for admin, I think that it's really important for them to also know when to jump into things. I have had experiences where admin has really jumped in, but then I've also had experiences where admin have not jumped in, and I have had to take the extra step to jump in to defend somebody that I don't even know. And it just really shows at the end of the day. And it just, this is something our community definitely should get better with. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the board members. Mr. Land.
So I've heard a lot of good things about this. Ms. Yoon and Ms. Sharma really did a great job of talking about giving a safe space. And you know, Ms. Kemke in her presentation earlier was talking about interruption and restoration. And so I think what the problem is there's a disconnect between theory and practice. I think we're talking on a very high level about what needs to happen, and that's good, and that's a good start. And I think the Equity Project was talking and pointing out that. But as the speakers we were just hearing are saying, it's happening prevalently at the sites, and it's not being dealt with, it's not being addressed, it's not being interrupted. And I think it behooves all of us to take a stand, both staff, teachers, administration, district administration, and students, to say, no, that's not acceptable. And we need to do more to support that. The second point I was going to make was, you know, what Ms. Kaufman talked about with measurement is important. We have to measure this. This is important to measure. It's like, how many incidences are we having? Even if it is anonymous, we need to have that out there and address that by school, so we can say, this is the problem. Look how many instances these are occurring, whether it's through anonymously or brought to someone, a counselor. The sad part is, for administration, and as a principal, I know when things are anonymous, it's really hard to deal with, because you don't know where it happened and how to address it and how to take it on. When you know who the people are, then you can talk about it. You can bring people together. Restorative justice can happen. And we have to figure out a way to give that, again, what Ms. Yoon talked about, which is that safe space to be able to have people come and say, here's the problem. help me with this problem, and have them feel safe. I think that's critical. I think we have a better job. We have a long road ahead to fix this. A jury report, that's fine. But you know what? It's indicative of what's happening in our country, and it points that out. And I think what we need to do is focus on ourselves and focus on each of the schools. And when the rubber hits the road, we need to worry about the practices that we do, what happens in the classroom, what happens in the hallways, what's happening online, and not disregarding it. And I think that is the first step. So anyway, I wanted to thank the speakers for their contributions today.
Ms. Lees-Dwyer,
Okay,
remember what's before us is to approve the response or change.
Right. I get that. I hope everyone does. Okay. I really appreciate Ms. Kaufman's comments, because I think she made some very good points, and I would hope that the administration takes those points and reviews the document with those points in line, because I think that we should be measuring, we should be looking at what we're doing, and there should be reporting out so that we can see that progress is being made. So I think that's very important. The other piece that the students talked about, I don't want to play whack-a-mole where we just keep whacking the problem and then the problem doesn't go away. It just depends on who happened to get whacked. We need to change the culture so that no one's getting whacked. And it goes back to what I said, the little mantra, we do not talk like that here. We accept each other. We value everyone, what everyone brings to our school. We need to change the culture so that we don't, it's not a correction. It should be a correctional situation. It should be why would you talk like that? We aren't those we're not those people. So I'm really looking for more change at the level where we all embrace true equity for everyone. So thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Hanley.
So didn't I read, we've had an anonymous mechanism in there for a number of years. Isn't that correct? You're on mute. Correct?
Yes, it's correct.
So what we have committed to do, I think, is that we need to publicize that so that it is wider known and available. Although I agree with Greg's comment that anonymous reports are very difficult to deal with. I've had some examples in my charter school organization. They're just difficult to deal with. So I understand the issue around anonymous, but I also understand the difficulty with actually dealing with an anonymous report, because it's hard to take action on it. So I would say that yes, we need to make known that it's possible to make an anonymous report, but I think we need to encourage people to come forward and make the culture such that they feel comfortable doing that. That's the best remedy if we can move in that direction. And I would support trying to put something in there that gives us a mechanism that tracks incidents that are reported. If we can do that, is that something that we could create, Dr. Skelly?
Well, so I'll give this to Mr. Scatena, but we have that data. It's expected out of us every year. It doesn't solve the problem that Ms. Sharma mentioned, which is if students don't come forward, but we have documentation on that. Mr. Scatena, you want to talk just a little bit more about, and we do give the board presentations around these kinds of issues, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the system Anonymous Alert is it has a lot of analytics. We do track this data. When something is reported, a student can, or staff member or a parent can opt to say I am anonymous or I'm not. And if they say not, then you could actually have a dialogue. It's the link for anonymous reporting is on every website in the district, every school website. It is on the back of every student's ID card that every student carries. It is, we try our best to promote it. It's often mentioned in every health class, and it's mentioned, of course, at the beginning of the year, and often principals' messages throughout the year.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time.
This is our 3rd year.
Yeah. So, okay.
Can you talk a little bit about, Mrs. Catania, can you talk about where we do some of the data? I do want to mention one piece that was brought up here is about, how do students feel? What's the culture like? And those are some questions that we, have typically relied on with the Healthy Kids Survey in terms of school safety. But this year we have what we think is a more robust system using a program called Panorama, which you have also seen when we talked about how was distance learning going, but gives us a capability to answer some of the questions about metrics that we have here. Obviously, this is a year where our discipline issues are way down just because we don't have kids interacting with each other. Maybe that's a way to solve this problem, but I don't think so. But Mr. Scatani, can you talk a little bit about like the Office of Civil Rights reports we have to do and other pieces like that?
Sure. Tracking the data, we do it in our student information system for the Office of Civil Rights reports. But again, Office of Civil Rights, and those are only the reports that are coming forward and the ones that are investigated. So we're only as good as the information that's provided or observed or reported. So we do Office of Civil Rights reports are completed at the end of every year. We do it on an annual basis. We track everything from hate speech, hate violence, discrimination, harassment, and bullying. And then we track whether it's a targeted group, a targeted subgroup that is a part of the reporting. What we're taking away from this
the grand jury report noted that this by and large is not getting reported, period. Right. I mean, it's not getting reported. So, that's an issue. I think we should track it, but it's an issue that right now it's not getting reported, and so I think there's something we've got to do a little work on the culture of reporting it probably, and getting people to recognize that that's something they should be doing.
Sorry, Don. That's what we're committed to doing, and we say by fall 2021, but that's just because of the deadlines put in by the report. But we understand, and we agreed with the findings that we need to have our policies and our handbooks explained in a manner that all can understand it, explains our anti-bias policies and where students and families can report them. And we want to change our culture, like what Linda Lees Dwyer has been saying. We're committed to that. We're committed to do that in writing, and we're committed to do that while in our reports to parents, or reports to the board, and also in person to the students. We have, like the students are saying, I mean, we have to train our staff, and in our response here, we show that we've had multiple trainings in equity and restorative justice and how to respond to these type of things. And we're committed to that. As the board has stated several times tonight, they've been through equity training, and it's been a long process. We've been doing it for years, and we're only gaining more momentum as more and more things come to light, and we're moving to face the challenges that we all face as a nation, and certainly in our schools. We're committed to doing that. The measurements are going to be tough because a lot of things have gone unreported. So what are we measuring it to? But we certainly keep track of all of the anonymous tips that we get, and then not always are they anonymous. We had one today where a student reported another student might be doing self-harm, and we had 2 or 3 schools involved with that immediately. And that's not uncommon. We get a lot of really serious tips in this anonymous alert, and we follow through immediately. Everyone gets a copy of it, and we're committed to doing that. And if the students don't feel it's safe to provide, or there's not a safe space on campus to report an incident, that's got to change. And it's not that way because we haven't tried, but if that's the feeling out there, we're committed to making sure that we get out there and we advertise and we keep repeating that, like the board members have said, that we're nice to people, we say we're respectful to people, and we don't tolerate any of this type of behavior. And if it does occur, you need to report it and we'll address it immediately. And that's what we're committing to in this report, although it doesn't go into all the details because they didn't ask for that detailed of a response, like the property damage. We have all of that in other policies, and of course there's responses to that, but we tried to focus on in this report on what the grand jury was asking. But certainly we would include property damage, and the culture and the climate of the campuses really is the gateway to responding to these situations outlined in the grand jury.
I think.
Okay. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we haven't talked about is how to be publicized that, and so we're more transparent. I think what Ms. Kaufman and Ms. Zuniga was talking about were taking these anonymous tips and saying, okay, categorizing and letting the public know what's happening, and so that we can see what's happening and publicize it. So I think that's something of part of the reporting part that we need to work on too, because I think if people saw that, they'd go, oh, there's like 30 people. Maybe I feel comfortable, I can report and make a report. So I think that's something that we need to consider.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I think now that we categorize them into our usual report, but maybe we can focus more on what's coming through the anonymous alerts. And of course, that report is going to be coming to the board in the next couple months, maybe at the beginning of the new calendar year.
And sometimes, not a lot of people watch this, so we have to find another way to publicize it beyond our board meeting.
Yep.
Mr.
Okay.
Griffin, your turn.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what everybody says, and I think it's been emphasized. We got a lot of the tools and basic process procedures, although there's a lot of room for improvement. We got to remove the stigma about reporting. I mean, it all begins with the reporting process, and really encourage use of it. I'm really, there was a couple of points of confusion, maybe not confusion and clarity in the actual fiscal response, but I'm really more concerned about some of the comments actually being incorporated in the board policy over and above the grand jury response. I think we should respond and agree, disagree, and kind of give them a high level what we want to do. But I do want to see some of these comments really incorporated into the policy and an administrative reg. Because I think the reg deals with a lot of the details, the reporting functionality, or the web, like annually distribute the information, or have sessions, or informational sessions, or different type of things. So I think I want to see the problem solved, and not necessarily the grand jury response is sort of a byproduct, but I think the real issue is how we actually deal with these things on a day-to-day basis. A lot of it has to do with information distribution and changing mindsets out there. So,
yeah, the one thing that we've been looking at is a way to present our board policies, regulations, and our practices in a different way than kind of the dry manner of how our board policies are written. And there's other districts out there that we've seen that have, kind of colorful and illustrated material that shows how to report and what's not appropriate, and how to respond to things when you hear them or when you see them in a way that is attractive, people would look at it, and it's not just, ink on words on paper. So I think, and we have a great communications and publications staff, and I think we can do, just as well communicating that way and get people to recognize it and incorporate it into their practices.
So my comment is the promoting of the, were you done, Bob?
Yes.
So my comment is on the promoting, the anonymous tip reporting. One of the things that occurs to me is, I think a lot of students need to think it needs to be reach a certain level before they're promoted. I don't know how you delineate that level, but I would like us to go out there and promote and say, hey, if you walk down the hall and you hear someone make a homophobic joke, report it, even if it wasn't directed at you. Every little incident you hear, report it, so that we start a new baseline, in other words.
Right.
And then we can work down from that. And I guess, so that's the first thing. The second thing, I don't know how to say that. I was somewhat surprised but disappointed by Ms. Yoon's comments, not the specific comments. My daughters were in the Burlingame community 10, 15 years ago, and they would have said the same thing. Okay. And that's why I was disappointed, is that, nothing's gotten better, it seems, in Burlingame. If anything, it seems to have gotten worse. And, just all the comments I hear, same thing I heard 10 years ago, same thing I heard 15 years ago. And I know from talking to the superintendent, Burlingame feels picked upon because of this. But it could, and as Ms. Sharma said, similar comments are made. I believe you're at Aragon and San Mateo, right? So similar comments can be made in San Mateo, and I know there's issues in the other communities too. But I seem to feel from just what I've heard in overtimes, Burlingame is worse, and we need to have a plan to attack that strongly, with strong training of staff, uncomfortable training of staff. And I didn't see that in the response. And then if it works at Burlingame, we can roll it out to other schools. So I'd like to see that in the response. Really that we recognize that Burlingame might be a little worse than other parts of the community, and we have a strong plan to attack.
Okay, so that I'd like some direction from the board. That's one board member's opinion. And Ms. Friedman, are you saying that's a comment about Burlingame High School or about the community of Burlingame?
It's both, but yes, high school.
Could I just mention that, the last response that we had is around bringing in a provider on this issue of hate speech, implicit bias, and our school's response to it. It's in the response, but I'm hearing that we want to start with Burlingame as part of the recommendation there.
Well, that was my recommendation, and Dr. Skelly's right to ask the rest of the board.
Okay.
Yes, Linda, I thought you just.
I really don't think that we should select out one school. I don't really think that's appropriate. The spray painting hate incident at Burlingame could have occurred at any school. And the other incident could have happened at any school over the years, and we may just not know about it. So I think that I don't think it's right to pick out one school, because we don't know what goes on with all the other communities as much if we don't have, since your history is based upon your kids being there. And I have that same history. And there are things that that obviously I think could have been done better, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's the right thing to do to pick out one school, because things can happen at any school at any time.
I don't disagree with you, but if another school had been spray painted, we would have known about it. If another school had been spray painted with homophobic, anti-Semitic and racist comments, I think we would have heard about it.
We did hear about it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but your point is it could have happened at another school and we never heard about it.
So I do want to just, Paul Belzer, principal at Burlingame, had reached out to see if he can get some immediate support. We do have the desire to identify a organization to train all staff, but we do have continuing hours with NAP that he's going to use at Burlingame in this coming spring semester. So some of the work can start there with their staff directly, just because that incident is quite raw. And then we're going to go full force with training for all staff in these other areas. So I think, it's a bit of both. Like that, we'll follow with the response that we have here. And I think some of that work will start in the spring. Paul Belzer had already kind of identified the need to do it sooner than later. We do have a plan for how we'll identify a provider to train all staff on this this topic. It could be the National Equity Project, but we do want to spend a little bit more time vetting out a provider. So I don't know if that helps, but that's part of what.
Well, I just like to gently suggest that I understand what you're saying, Mr. Friedman, and this report singled out Burlingame, but I think you could find, certainly not the spray painting issue or that piece, but this could have happened at any of our schools. And we have challenges. And when we call out one school in a particular way, I think it takes away from the collective sense of responsibility we should have on this. So
at this board level, it was me and Ms. Yoon. Ms. Yoon was also talking about other unpublicized incidents at Burlingame. And so was, I forget her name, the student who spoke before.
I think it was Sharma. Oh.
Gamze.
Yes, thank you.
Gamze.
Well, but Mark, just because Aragon and San Mateo and Mills and Hillsdale aren't here doesn't mean that they don't have they don't have students who would speak out.
No, they might and they might not, but
they probably do.
We've heard it from the Burlingame students. That's all, and just to say, so we've heard it from the Burlingame students, but we didn't hear it from the other students, and they might have something to say. That's, to me, that tells the Burlingame students, don't really think about it. You're just in line with all the others.
Well, but Mark, Miss Sharma spoke out, and she goes to Cappuccino. Okay. So we have two different schools. The only two people sitting here, students, are Burlingame and Cappuccino. Let's bring the other group. Let's put one from each school in. They're all going to tell you the same thing.
We'll see that. I mean, we'll see if we put or not. But you could see
there's
that.
Some hands going here.
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
The grand jury report, I think what we should do is agree, disagree, state what we intend to do in terms of responses, and avoid editorial comments of any sort, which would include, schools and and sort of hyperbole and those type of things. We need to measure that response and just respond responsibly.
Craig.
I was going to agree with that. And to take that one step further is listening to Dr. Kempke. Why don't we make, because I was looking over the recommendations and the timeline. In that last part, you could add one that is specific to what Ms. Kempke just said about Burlingame. By end of this is what's going to happen at that school.
I would urge you not to do that. I would urge you to make this a district effort. We are a district. We don't want to put this the short hair or what is it on Burlingame High, as if it just makes it so there's not a sense of urgency for the other schools.
No, I don't. I disagree with you. I think what's important is just outlining what you're going to do and your action step. And that action step that just Dr. Kempke talked about is specific to Burlingame. Are we doing that at other schools?
That's because the principal had the courage to step up and say he needed some extra help.
And
now you're going to penalize him by putting something in the report that I just think is not productive.
Yeah.
I think it highlights a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well,
I think it highlights exactly what I think. If someone did something,
can you give me permission to work with staff and come back with a recommendation at the next meeting on that?
Okay.
I'd be really curious how the Burlingame students feel about that. Maybe you should, maybe you should reach out to them if they feel that, you know, they've commented about the issue, the incidences at their school, and you know, do they feel that if they're called out, we're not all as one, you know, in the way that Mr. Land said, or do they feel that it's appropriate? I'd rather defer to the students, you know, who've reported this to us.
I tend to agree with Bob's approach on it.
I'm going to retract.
Me too.
What Bob said. I'm going with what Bob said.
I'm with Bob.
I get it.
Do the students want to comment?
Well, I'll comment. I know that at Burlingame High School, we have had several very serious situations regarding hate speech and hate crimes that have gone past just remarks in the hallway, which are still very serious, but we have physical acts that have occurred at Burlingame High School. But I also know of students who go to other schools who have experienced problems that are, you know, just as jarring or just as frequent. And I feel as though if the district is going to make any action, it should be a collective action towards reform throughout the entire district. And I think that localizing it to just one area, especially in a public response, it might kind of negate the experiences of other students at other schools. Because I know that these things happen at all schools, and there are very serious problems at all of our schools in the district. So I'm not sure how Jesse feels, but.
No, I totally agree. Personally, like going to Cappuccino, hearing that if you guys wanted to just push everything just to start with Burlingame, that kind of, it just doesn't feel right, because I personally know about the issues that are going on at my school, but they won't be looked at the same as Burlingame because we didn't get graffitied on our school. And I think that that's definitely something to look at. One more thing that I also wanted to say going back is I definitely think that we should, as our whole community, just to going out to every school, really push anonymous, because personally, I didn't know that it was on the back of my ID card till like 30 minutes ago. And I'm sure a lot of other students might not know about it either. So I really think also if we report out to parents and students about how useful anonymous is and just how many alerts you guys normally get on like a weekly basis, it would make just the students feel a lot more comfortable, and it would just really bring the community better and bring the community into like a better place, just so everybody feels more comfortable using it, so they know that, oh, my peers are using it, I can use it as well. And just, yeah, to make the district a better place. I think that's a really good start. I agree
with that. That was what I was saying earlier. I was picturing signs in the hallway. If you hear something that's blah, 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 or blah, 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 report it on anonymous. You know, really, really encouraging it with like posters in the hallway. And, you know, things like every comment, every violation should be reported.
Yeah, I was just gonna say pretty much the same thing as Mr. Friedman and Jesse just said. Kind of, because I know a lot of students, at least for me, we are aware of the anonymous alert, but for us, it feels like that should be reserved for more serious situations or incidents. And I think kind of publicizing it to the students that every comment that makes you or other students feel uncomfortable and unsafe, that can be reported. It doesn't have to be large large incidents or large acts towards you. It can be just simple comments that make you feel like you don't belong or you don't feel comfortable in your school.
Good idea. I like the posters.
So do you guys just want to approve the
response
as is?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought, but
Make a
I have a
motion.
quick question. I thought that they were going to go back and see whether there could be some metrics or something put in so
Well,
that.
what I think we'll do is we'll
metrics put in. That's a good point.
Well, I know. I mean, Kevin had something to say.
Well, let us go back, work on it, staff, and we'll bring this back with a description either for a consent item that identifies the changes that we made, or it's a regular action item. And I'll probably speak to the president and vice president when we do agenda setting where it's placed. But obviously, somebody can pull it, or if somebody speaks on it, then we pull it.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
The addition, I guess the additions would be the two things that seemed there was consensus was some sort of tracking system and also some sort of promotion of the anonymous system to try to capture much more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And measurement.
Good. Okay. Does anyone, what is on the agenda now? There's not even, that is board operations. So no more comments? Yes.
Good night.
Oh, that was not a, I want to speak. That was.
Good
That was a
night.
good night, Mark.
Good night.
Good night, Bob. Good night, Lagia.
Good night, everybody.
Night, John Boy.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night,
Good
Allison.
night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jesse.
Bye, Linda. Bye, everybody.
Jesse.
Way to go. Oh, good night, Laura.
Okay, I'm just going to get rid of all of you.
I know you're out. I'm out of here. See ya.
Good night, Moon. Good night, Room.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Good night, cow jumping over the moon.